I'll go ahead and say this is July 11th, 2023. We're in the Pensacola Library. I'm Marna Weston for the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program, and we'll be interviewing Mr. Charles Jefferson in just a few moments. I want to take a second to give the members of our group a chance to introduce themselves. As I mentioned, Deborah Hendricks is with us, and
Krystin Anderson.
Ashley Sanguino.
Vanessa Obando.
Avery Goodman.
thank you all for being with us too. So, Mr. Jefferson, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
It's a pleasure. We're here to learn about Pensacola and about its business district and its community, all these things that we can learn from you. May I ask first if you could please tell us, please say and spell your name.
My name is Charles Jefferson, CharlesJefferson.
And when and where were you born?
I was born in Monroeville, Alabama in 1943.
Who were your mom and dad?
My mother was Clara Bright. The family name is Bright. My mother was a single parent. That's that right.
Okay.
And I did not learn who my dad was until I was 22 years old, because back in that time, I think it was an embarrassment to have a child not be married. Is what I think. I just didn't know. If I asked questions, I didn't get an answer.
The information that you found about your father afterwards, did you have any type of relationship with him, or do you know who he was?
No, I did not. I now know who he is, but I don't know. I'd never met him.
Okay. Let's talk about your mom's family then. Who were her mother and father?
Her mother and father were Charlie and Lillian Bright. And my grandfather, at the time, he lived in Frisco City, Alabama. And my mother was born there, and I was born there. I've done some geological work, some history, so I know a little bit more about them. He was always a sharecropper, and my grandmother stayed at home and cooked and bossed us around and taught us how to be good children.
What was her name?
Her name was Lillian Mosley, and it's been my grandmother. You had to. She did not say the same thing twice. If you didn't obey right away, she would either pinch your ear or have you go out and get a switch, and she'd teach you how to say yes ma'am and no ma'am, and how to be a polite young individual.
If you brought back a little switch, would she go out and put a few together and twist them up?
If you go get it, that's right. if you bought something that was inadequate, she would then take care of that task.
That sounds like my grandmother Lucille, my mom's mother. Now, most people can remember back about their grandparents. They have fond memories of them. Can you go any further back in your family and tell us about any members?
I can't from my memory, but from my research I can.
Oh, anything you'd like to share, we'd love to hear.
My great-grandfather was, he was born right in Monroeville, and he had 3 kids, and he was a sharecropper also. And then his father, my great-great-grandfather, I believe that he was a slave who came in South Carolina, and he drove a wagon, which we think of slaves as working the field and chopping corn and all that. He was a wagon driver though. He drove him and 2,300 slaves walked and rode from South Carolina to Little Peach River, Alabama.
So they walked from South Carolina into slavery in Alabama.
Right.
Do you recall the family that was associated, the white family that
I
had
cannot
the name?
find him. I don't know. I do not know.
Have you ever gone back and done any genealogical research on the actual sale of your original relatives as they arrived in America?
I haven't been able to find anything that. I think that this is the conundrum I have right now. My great grandfather, there is an 1795 reference to my grandfather, which his name was Lodrick Bright. But back in that time, slaves were not listed on the census, but he was.
So do you believe he was free?
Either he was free or he was white. So if that's the case, because I get that one reference, and then the next reference is he's in a boarding house in North Carolina. And again, he's listed. But I'm not sure if he didn't have a illicit relationship, let's say.
Of course.
And then had kids which took his name. I don't know that. I can't find anything to tie that down specifically. But he fits that 1795 date, and then the date of I have a slave schedule for that boarding house with his name.
Where was that boarding house located in North Carolina?
I don't remember right offhand, but it's not Raleigh. I'll think of it, I think.
Okay. Can you talk to us about any brothers and sisters that you had? Did you have a big family, a small family?
I have 3 siblings, 1 sister and 1 brother.
Could you tell us their names? And if you can approximately just say their date of birth, that would be interesting.
Yeah, I'm the oldest of the 3 kids. I was born in 1943, as I said earlier. My sister was born after me. She was born in February, and she was born in 1946.
What was her name? Or is her name?
Dorothy Jefferson. And my brother was John Henry. He was born in 1947, 1 year later. They were born 1 day apart. My brother was, he was born the 2nd. My sister was born the 3rd. So he would have 1 day, he would be the same age as her. He reveled in that. He really liked, I'm the same age as you, you're not older than me. But anyway, those are my 3 siblings.
When you grew up, did you grow up on a farm in the city? Could you describe what your home was like with your mother and your
My mother
2
was
siblings?
and I was born in Monroeville, Alabama. When I was 5 years old, my mother decided to move to Pensacola. That's how we got here. I was 5.
How far is Monroeville from Pensacola?
113 miles, I think it is.
Okay, so a good trip. Even today, 2 hours. So,
It was, yes. Back in that time, it was a good little trip. Matter of fact, almost the whole family moved to Pensacola over a period of about 5 to 6 years. Initially, my uncle, my grandfather had 6 kids, 3 boys and 3 girls. And they, all but one of them moved over a 5-year period to Pensacola and got good jobs.
what was that uncle's name? And if you can recall your other aunts and uncles of the 6, please list them.
Okay, my oldest uncle was Lee. The next one was my aunt was senior moment.
Of course.
My aunt was Edna, and then another aunt was May. Her name was May. And then my uncles were, as I said, Lee earlier, and then Alfonso. I had one uncle who was John Henry, my brother was named after him. He joined the military, and he was killed out of basic. So my grandfather drew a check for him for the next 60 years, and he did not want to change it. So even though he lived in Pensacola, every month he would go up to Alabama to get his check.
And
I have no idea how much it was.
I think, would there be one more? Is it another aunt
That's that May, Edna. Oh, my mother.
Oh, and your mom. Okay, of course. Of course. Thank you. What's your earliest memory of education, first going to school?
My oldest is, I think I was in first grade. I was going down in Pensacola, and I went to school about 10 blocks from here, off of Cervantes. I don't remember the name of the school, but I just remember that it had a big iron fence around it, and that I went to school. I have no memory of anything that went on in the school, but I do remember that. The next school I remember actually is Spencer Bibbs, which is on Pensacola. You have east side, west side. Mm-hmm. The first school I went to was on the west side, and the next school, Spencer Bibbs, was on the east side.
Could you say the name of the school again, please?
Spencer, S-P-E-N-C-E-R-B-I-B-B, Spencer Bibb Elementary
Spencer Bibb Elementary, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Is that school still there today?
It's still there, but it's not. They closed it about 3-4 years ago, I think, because it's an older school. Mm-hmm. And actually they haven't, usually when they close them down, they make it into some kind of a school resource, mm-hmm. but it's just sitting there right now.
Do you remember any teachers or the principal from Spencer Bibb?
The first time I fell in love
okay.
was in elementary school. I don't remember the teacher's name, but that's the first. I think before that, I didn't care anything about school. I was just a country boy. Mm-hmm. I didn't care about school. Mm-hmm. But when I fell in love with it, I started doing my work. I did everything I was supposed to do and mm-hmm. running up and getting approval.
Mm-hmm. Cleaning the boards and everything?
Yes, anything that she needed to do. I just remember that. And that's actually only a memory I have. Now, where my memory tightens up is when I went to high school, though. Mm-hmm. In Pensacola, Florida, Booker T. Washington High School is the school. Mm-hmm. It's the black school. And I graduated in 1962. Today, over this weekend, or over the summer rather, we just had a celebration of the classes of the 60s. Mm-hmm. So we all those classes from 1960 to 1969, mm-hmm. we all get together as a class. I was in the class of 62. Mm-hmm. So yeah.
So you have fond memories of high school?
I have fun. The first time, let me go back to my childhood. Like you were saying, as a young five-year-old, when it was church on Sunday, mm-hmm. that's where I learned. I have a strict moral code for myself, and I get that. I went to church every Sunday. Matter of fact, at some point, I participated in a wedding, and I married one of the other girls in the school, and she was 2 years behind me, and we always joke about that whenever I run across her. We got married way back when we were 6 and 7 years old.
What's your wife's name?
Laura. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't meet her until much later. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And children? We have 3 children, Pamela, Mark, and Stephen. Mm-hmm. My oldest is Pamela. She was born in 1966. And she has a varied upbringing. She sang her way through high school. Mm-hmm. My daughter could sing. Mm-hmm. We were, well, I was in the military for 23 years. We were stationed in Fort Ord, California. So she was in the school in Sand City in Monterey. But I don't know where she got it from. I think my mother sang too. She was in the choir. But my daughter sang. She sang all the way through high school. She had the whole, I think she had maybe 700 people in her senior class. They were all crying because she sang the way we were at the graduation or at one of the ending ceremonies. And the whole class was, but she sang at every thing that they had at school. She did the singing, so she was famous.
And better than Barbra Streisand.
Yes. My sons, the first one was Mark. He was born in Germany. And he was well, when he was born, he was a big boy. He was 8 pounds, and the nurses came out and they said, back then, you took your wife to the hospital, and they take her into the back room, and they take you over and sit you down in the waiting room, and you wait right there. We'll let you know when we need you. So when he was born, they came and told me he was a boy. So I went and announced it to all my friends that because I had one girl and now I have a boy. And I'm all proud. I did not want a junior though. For some reason, I did not want a junior, so we named him Mark. And I think I looked through I had no college education at that time, but I looked through the book until I found a name that I felt like suited him, and that was Mark. It might have been, I'm not sure if it was the Bible or not, I don't know, but that's what I named him. But when as they were feeding him all those 3 or 4 days, they give him that little short bottle. It was not enough for him. So I had to tell him, feed my boy. They said, okay, we'll feed him. And even when he came home, we had to put that oatmeal in the bottle because that milk was not filling. But and then the youngest one, Stephen, he was conceived in Germany, but he was born here in Pensacola, at the Naval Hospital.
I'd love to talk to you about your military career, but before we start with that, which I'm sure will be extensive, I'd like to go back to your childhood for just a moment. When you grew up, did you have chores? Did you live on a farm? What kind of things did you have to do, your responsibilities at home?
At 5, I didn't. The only chore I had that I can remember is I would go to the cotton fields with probably my grandfather and my mother, and they would send me to the creek with a bucket to get water. Other than that, I don't remember any chores.
So you didn't have to tear up your hands, because that cotton, that's tough work. I tried that a little bit. That's tough work with that cotton.
See, once we grew up as a teenager, my Uncle Lee, he was the oldest one, he stayed in Alabama. He did not come. He came down and didn't like it. So he went back, and he was a sharecropper for all of his life. We would go every summer up to Uncle Lee. I had 13 cousins. My Uncle Lee would have about 8 of them at his place over summer. That's his sisters would lay that on him. But we would go up and we pick cotton.
100-pound sacks.
100-pound sacks.
100-pound sacks.
If I
Always
could,
100 pounds.
as a older teenager, probably about 14, 15, I could get right at 100 pounds. It was, a penny a pound? I think it was. A penny a pound. Yes, if.
Sometimes they short you.
Yes, that's right. It's wet out there, so you got to take off so many. I can remember we would, after we picked the cotton, we get our little money. They had a country store that was about a mile away from the house that he lived, the sharecropper house. We would go up to the store on a big orange and a piece of cheese, I think it was. And you get that 2 little things, probably 2 or 3, maybe a nickel or more, who knows how much.
For us, it was a moon pie and a RC Cola.
Yeah. Yes, goodness. But it was kind of a fun thing, you're right though, that picking that cotton, my sister was not able to do that. So of course, what my brother and I had to do was we'd pick our row, and then she'd be way far back. So we had to get over on her row and go back to catch her up.
She'd get 100 pounds?
Yeah. No, we didn't put it, we put it in our sack.
Oh, okay.
she never would get much more. He had to feed her, because she didn't earn her keep.
Did you do anything besides just the tobacco? Did you do cucumbers? Besides the cotton, you mean nothing else, just the cotton?
Not just cotton.
Okay, well,
That's
thank you.
the only thing we did as in summertime.
When you think back on those summers, did you ever, throw a watermelon in a creek and have it get cold and then come get it later or anything like that?
What we did do is, we had the sharecropper's house was here, and then the farmer, the owner was here. Between those 2 houses, there was a watermelon field, and they told us, don't go in that, don't bother those watermelons. That didn't work out too well. And then they got mad because you just break one open, take the heart out, and then leave the rest of it. And that was really infuriating.
Wasted it.
Yes, you wasted it. You wasted it. But that was fun. And actually, those cousins, even today, I'm 80, the ones who are still here, we still are very close, almost like brothers.
Now, did you get married before you went to the service, or did you go to the service first and then get married?
I went to service first.
Okay, tell about that. How did you decide that you were going to go and serve your country?
Okay, I did well in school, in high school. In my high school, in Washington High School, B.T. Washington Senior High School, the teachers were phenomenal. Our teachers were like parents, or older than parents. Because they were more knowledgeable. Like I said, I did well in my class. I graduated 10, and I had a good GPA, but I did not really study all that hard. I listened well, so I was able to pick it up. I guess I'm an oral learner is what it amounts to. So if the teacher said it, then I would remember it. So I never had much problem making good grades. But what I started at, what was I hate with that? I graduated, when I graduated, why did I choose the Army? I graduated high school, I had a scholarship to go to Booker T. Washington Junior College, which was right next door to the high school. And I went down and got myself a job, because I wanted to buy myself a new car, a car. And I had in mind I wanted to get a 1955 Buick. And so I went down and got a job at the Pensacola Buggy Work, was a Chevrolet dealership, making 50 cents an hour.
Good money.
Cents an hour, yes, sir.
Good money.
That's nothing, good money. And I worked about 3 weeks, and by this time I had a stepfather, which I loved dearly. No, he informed me that the light bill was due every month, and the
Gotta have
water,
some kind of job.
and your mother's ironing your clothes and stuff, so she should get something. So I thought, you know what? I'm not going to be able to get this Buick that I want to get. I got this scholarship. I didn't know what a scholarship was, really, because my mother had a 7th grade education. She was a domestic worker. She worked for the same people, which I'll put this in. My mother was they call housekeeper. That's what she was. She worked for the same people for probably 25 years. The first 20, they just paid her. But somewhere along the way, they realized that she had no Social Security, and she didn't have anything that she would be able to rely on as she got older. So they created and this is way back when, I mean, now it's done as a formal. They created her, got her a card, and started paying into Social Security so she would be eligible. And she didn't know anything about it, but they did. So now I got lost again.
As you want to tell you, it's your story. So
Okay, yes. So when I graduated, after my stepfather's announcement that I would have to start giving him some money.
What was his name, by the way?
Felter Fleming.
Okay, Felter Fleming.
Yeah, and I decided, okay, I'm not going to be able. So I went down and joined the Army. So I'm going to show him. I don't need him. I don't need him to show me anything. I'm a smart individual. I graduated high in my class.
You didn't talk to him or your mom about the decision? You just went down. Okay. What did the recruiter say to you when they got you to sign?
I was 18, so he didn't say anything. You sign up.
Did they tell you what your job was going to be?
Yes. They told me that they allowed me to choose the job that I wanted. But then they tricked me once I got in.
I want to be a lifeguard.
Yeah. I said I wanted to be something electronics. All through high school, I had no idea what I wanted to be, but I would always put down electronic technician. I didn't know what that was, but that sounded pretty good. So when I went to sign up, he had this book, and we looked through it, and he showed me what jobs I could get based on my score, which I had done well. So they signed me up. I went to. That's the first time I felt like a piece of meat, though. I went from, they put you on a bus and you go to Montgomery, and you run through this assembly line of things that you have to do.
Cut your hair,
yes,
give you clothes, all that.
Yes, all that. But after the physical exam, so I'm standing in front of the doctors. They have a panel there, and they say, well, you know, he's got flat feet. And the guy said, well, they all have flat feet. And at the time, I didn't realize I was insulted. I didn't really even know it. They all got flat feet. Well, he's right. I do have flat feet.
Oh, but when he said they all have flat feet.
It was yes. Okay. Yes. They all have flat feet. So then they said, well, I said, let him go. It's not going to bother him. And so I wound up, and I came home and told my mom. From the time that I signed up until the time I left, it was probably a month at the most.
Mm-hmm. And we'll go back and describe that moment with the panel for a second when they said they all have flat feet. Were all the people making the determination white officers?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So the Army was still segregated
Yes.
at the time you went in?
Yes.
Okay.
In 62, yes.
So when you got your job, then they sent you to basic.
Right.
Can you tell us where you went to basic and what happened there?
Fort Jackson, South Carolina. Mm-hmm. In Fort Jackson, your introduction is they run you down the place and make you run in all kinds of ways. And then you're lined up in a formation. I was a regular Army, RA, but they had some soldiers who were drafted. They were U.S. They dogged those guys. But the
Drill sergeant?
Mm-hmm. That's my wife out there.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if she's supposed to be.
Wait out here.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Would you like for her to join you?
She could, yeah. She's
Terrific.
If you don't
Why don't we
mind.
take just a quick break and set the room up for that?
Okay.
Terrific.
Find her a chair.
Because we almost to that point anyway. I got married.
I think that we need to ask Ms. Jefferson about herself and introduce yourself. We'll start anew.
Are we good?
Is it recording?
You got it.
She got both of us in the
Just have a
picture.
conversation.
Alrighty, hello. It is very nice to have you. We're from the University of Florida with the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program, so it's very nice to have you. If you could just state your name and spell it for us, please.
Okay, it's Laura, Laura, Jefferson, Jefferson.
Okay, perfect. So if you'd like to tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, when you grew up, some things about that.
Oh, okay. Well, I was born in Mobile, Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
I moved here when I was 13, and I left Pensacola at the age of 19. So I really didn't spend much time here.
So do you want to tell some things about your family, the names of your mother, your father, information on your siblings?
Oh, okay. My father was Eddie H. Gullette.
Mm-hmm.
And the spelling is Gullette. And when I came to live with my father and stepmother, my father owned a grocery store in an area called Olive Heights.
Mm-hmm.
But for some reason, outsiders have renamed it Wedgwood area. And Olive Heights was there before the Wedgwood came into play.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, he owned a grocery store there for many years, and that was part of his income. We he was something of an entrepreneur before his time. And I, as a teenager, worked in the store every day before school, every day after school. That was the family plan. And during the summer months, I also worked in the store, and I hated it. But I also had a brother. I'm 5 years older than my brother, and I have a sister, and I'm 15 years older than she. My brother and I did work in the store together, but I was the oldest, so I had most of the responsibility.
Yeah.
My dad was a very innovative person. He not only had the grocery store, which was a full-service grocery store. He worked at Armstrong Corporation. He had a job. He had the grocery store, and then he opened up a nightclub.
Wow.
I'll throw in, just to kind of supplement her. Her dad owned a solid block area. Over the years, he bought that land. And on that land, he had the store and the residence that they lived in, and another house. So he was in a black community. He was one of the people who set the standard. And really, as growing up, we lived in the black community. We had very little contact with outside our white community. Matter of fact, until I was about 13, I don't think I've had any kind of interaction with white people, because I went to school, I went home. Most of my time was spent with my 13 cousins and brothers and uncles and aunts and sisters and brothers like that. And I just wanted to throw that in about her dad.
Yeah. And my contact with outside the white community, mostly because there weren't any other nationalities that I knew about in this area at that time. But my only contact was with the salespeople that came into the store to sell us the products or to deliver products. And my dad believed in providing work for us. That's how we earn our extra money, rather than going outside of the home to work for other people. Not only that, when my dad moved here to Pensacola, I don't remember the year, but it may have been the late 40s, early 50s. He and my granddad built the house that they lived in. It was a 3-bedroom, 1 bath, and it's on the property that he had purchased. And after they got settled, my grandfather and grandmother lived in Camden, Alabama. My dad brought him down and portioned off a portion of the property for my grandmother and his house. So, and the two of them built the house for my grandmother and my grandfather. And they lived back, well, it was in the back of the property that we had, but there was this road that divided the properties.
So you married well.
Yeah. And
In more ways than one.
he also brought his cousin down and sold them a piece of property to build their house. As a matter of fact, there were two families that I know of that they came down. My dad sold them the property and helped them to build their house. If my grandfather and granddad didn't do it, then of course he helped them find people to help build a house. And those houses, except my grandparents' house, are still standing. My father was, I talk about him because he has more history than I do. He not only ran the grocery store, he had books where if people needed money, they would come and borrow money from him, and he'll write their name in this little green book. And they respected him a great deal. And I think my dad was like 25 when he started buying this property, and decided that he wanted to work for himself. But yet, and still, in order to earn the income that he wanted, he also took the job with the Armstrong. And we had a pretty decent life. Everybody in the neighborhood respected him. And once I left, and my brother and sister started growing older, the grocery business went kind of very slack in the community because there were big supermarkets built around. People were going to the other stores. So my dad saw that there needed to be a place for the teenagers. So he converted the store building into a teenage shop. So all the teenagers used to hang out there. They had a jukebox, they had a pool table, and what's that?
Pinball, arcade game?
It's like an arcade machine.
Pinball.
Pinball, had pinball and arcade machines in there. So it was a place for the kids to go. And they too respected him quite a bit. You know, the teenagers, they knew not to come into the building with mess, as they called it back in the day, because he would immediately shut it down.
In that era, a lot of the black businesses, they did not. You could not go in like the Blues. We have a restaurant. It's Blues is famous here.
Yeah.
You could not go in the Blues without a shirt, and you could not go in and make a ruckus or anything like that. If you ask him to taste he made me the ribs. If you ask him, "Can I taste him to see if I like him?" he'd throw you out. He did not. But you know, she's talking so much about her dad, but her mom family is much more of an influence on her life. You know, she did not have that. She has more ties. Her family name is Kirksey, and that family is really a tight family.
Yeah.
I mean, really tight family.
Yeah, I guess my early years growing up, when I was 13, and I come to help my dad move in with him, it was mainly because my dad wasn't paying child support. And I was living with my grandmother, and my grandmother had 13 people living in a 3-room house. Not a 3-bedroom. We had the living room, the middle room, and the kitchen. But those were the happiest years of my life, to be honest. It was weird, but we had, in the front room, there was a cousin that, she was an only child, so she had the only bed by herself. And in the middle room, my granddaddy and about 3 other cousins slept in one bed. My grandmother slept in a bunk bed. And on the top of the bunk, my sister and I, 3 of us slept on top of the bunk. I mean, you would think that would be horrible, but you know, that was a routine. Everybody knew what they were supposed to do, and we did it, and we were all pretty happy. We didn't know we were poor. And my favorite thing about remembering my grandmother is, on my mother's side, is coming home from school, and you can smell the butter beans cooking, and then the collard greens and the fried chicken down the road, and it was a happy feeling. Okay, we're gonna eat when we get home.
Family.
But anyway, I have lots of cousins in Mobile that we all grew up together and played together, and friends that lived across the track that, you know, we would all get together and play baseball, softball, hopscotch.
That's
whatever's going on.
That's one of the things. We traveled a lot in the military. So if you went to a different city and you wanted to go to the black community, just find the railroad tracks. Just find the railroad tracks and you'll find the black community. Not that it was bad or good, that's just where it was. And especially back a long time ago, the black community was here and the white community was there.
And sometimes the black community and the white community was right near the track. One lived on one side, one lived on the other side. The blacks that lived on the opposite side of the tracks, they usually called it the bottom. And I guess the white part was the top. But I lived, I used to love to read comic books. And one of my favorite books was called Heidi. I read that book over and over and over and over. And I remember I wanted a grandfather clock because that was in the book and it sounded exciting to have. And I wanted to see Amsterdam because in the book that those places were mentioned, and the windmills and the dikes and all of that. So I had an early interest in seeing those places. So God blessed me by marrying this man, and he was in the military, so we got to do that. When I first got married, I went to a place called Columbus, Georgia. I had never left home before. I had never spent the night with anyone because my father was very strict, and he was really my first boyfriend. So at 19, I was married and off to Columbus, Georgia. And I was afraid to stay home by myself, so when he had duty, the neighbors upstairs were newlyweds also, and she was young, and so I would go up and stay with her when he had duty at night, or vice versa. She'd come down and stay at my place. But to kind of sum all this up, I got a chance to travel Europe, and while we were stationed in Germany, we got to go to Amsterdam, Rotterdam, Madurodam, all those places in Holland. I got to see the windmills and the dikes and
tulips.
The tulips.
And so those were one of my favorite places. But Paris, France was my favorite. I heard about Paris. I wanted, they call it the City of Lights, and I wondered why they call it the City of Lights. I mean, every city has lights. So anyway, we drove to Paris from Germany with a friend, and we came into the city over a hill, and you could see the whole city below you, and it took my breath away. I went, oh my God, now I know why they call it the City of Lights. It's the most beautiful place you could see at night, and you saw the Eiffel Tower from any point in Paris. So we spent a few days there, and we got the royal treatment. The person that we went with grew up there. And so we got to see Paris as a tourist during the day and Paris as a resident at night, because the nightlife started around 7 or 8. We'd go to dinner, 9 o'clock is dinner time, and you just didn't go and eat and leave. You had to, that was like a 7-course meal. And you took your time and you ate. So it may take an hour, maybe an hour and a half.
My turn.
Before you switch off, I have a quick question. What was it like for you, having grown up in the South, then to go to Paris? I mean, was there a different treatment or a different air? How did you feel being there as opposed to being here in the States?
I did not want to come back to the States. There was so much disruption, so much prejudice here in the States. I felt accepted as a person, and I didn't feel, personally, like here it's black and white. Oh, I have this white friend, I have this black friend, I know this black person. Maybe that conversation may have come up, but never with the people that I associated with, Germans or French. It was just people, you're people. I know Laura. And, but the way I felt accepted, I felt equal. And it was a distinct difference.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to be distasteful, because
Oh,
I
no,
see it's just changed, but I just thought it'd be good for you to articulate that difference, because a person listening here might not understand integration, pre-integration, and the difference in Europe. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it.
I hope I made it clear.
You did.
Yeah. Yeah. But, another incident, while we were stationed over there, we took the kids camping in Denmark. and we actually saw the houses that the people lived in, and there was sod on the roof of the houses. And you know, you've heard the story where the cow is on top of the roof. They put the cows on the top to graze the grass. That was true.
Oh, wait a minute now.
I mean, I didn't see the cows grazing, but they had sod roofs on the houses.
Yes.
And I thought that was interesting. I wondered about the shoes that the Dutch people wear. Yes, they do wear the clogs, the wooden shoes, but they're for different reasons. They have the dress-up kind, and they have the kind they work in the garden with, you know, and then they probably have the just everyday shoes that they wear. So that was something that was an interest to me.
So because you married a military man, you got to see these things, all these things you dreamed that you would get to see.
When he got ready
We
to
talked
retire from the military, I was mad because I wanted to go back to I mean, I love the food. The food reminded me so much of Southern cooking, German food. The French food was delicious. It was just like, I love a lot of creamy meals and fried stuff, and you know, it was just an experience that everyone should have. I think you come up short if you don't have an opportunity to travel, even if you only travel in the United States.
Yeah.
Get out of your environment and see other environments. You'll become more acceptant of people and their cultures.
Yeah.
Welcome back.
Yeah, that's what I said, yeah. Yeah. In talking about the travel, from the time I went into service, we went to Germany twice, Taiwan, Thailand. I went to Thailand by myself, and Korea. In all those travels, unlike her, I got to know, like in Thailand, the Thai people, that's how they describe themselves, are very much like the black people. They are very accepting of individuals. They didn't, because we have our prejudices in the military, you know, you have the whites, you know, the black and all that. But they were very accepting in that country, as was the Germans were very, to me. I ran a electronic shop, so they were technicians, but they were very standoffish. You couldn't get to know a German right away. It took a while. It took a while before they would accept you. And in France, if you didn't speak French, they were not that welcoming. Oh, you been there too? They were not that welcoming.
I do speak French, so I'm lucky.
Okay.
Were you able to pick up on some French or Taiwanese when you were visiting?
In the military, if you go, depending on where you're going and what your job is, they'll send you to a school. So I went to school for 9 weeks to speak Thai. Mm-hmm. So I learned directions and such. The same thing with Germany. I went to a class where they teach you how to do directions, how to find a hotel, how to ask for whatever, the basic things. I didn't use it that much, so I lost it. Yeah, it's gone. You have to have a vocabulary.
I learned how to get in a taxi and tell them where I wanted to go, the address. Yes and no, what size, how much.
One of the interesting things, in Taiwan, they don't have streets. They have streets, I'm sorry. They don't have signs. So if the military assignment in Taiwan, you might live, let's say, on the east side, and you work on the west side, and there's a north and a south side. In order to go from one area to the other, you would have to draw a map, a handwritten map, and go so far and then turn and left and right and all that to find a place. So I found it to be very interesting in that the Taiwanese people, they are the Taiwanese people can tell the difference between a Taiwanese and a Chinese. You can't. You cannot do that, but they can. They know that I don't know if it's speech or the dialect or whatever, but I don't know if it was facial, because that's not something you discuss.
But when I was when my experience in Taiwan was dealing with the people. At first, when I got there, landed at the airport and got off the plane, the first thing that hit you is the heat. The next thing is the smell. And by the time we got to our hotel and seeing the crowdedness and all of the things on the street, I wanted to come back home right away. I didn't want to stay. I said, oh, I can't stay here.
This was at the end of...
What is the smell of?
Garlic and food
Their,
and
yeah.
just
Not only that, but
benjo ditches. You know,
their sewage was
sewage
like a little
system.
ditch with bricks over it.
And you
And
can,
they had water flowing through it, too, but you could still smell it.
if
You could still smell
if
it.
you interested in Taiwan, there's a book called Poo Poo Make Print Grow. And it's still on the market, but it's like you have to really go on the internet and...
She found it interesting.
I thought that book really told you the history of Taiwan. It tells you, explains everything to you. But, and the other thing I had problems with when I got there, like he said, everybody looked alike. So, and then I thought, okay, they think in the States, all people think that all black people look alike. So, in my head, I had to get that straight. We don't. And they didn't either. He couldn't. You can almost,
You couldn't tell the difference between the Chinese and the Taiwanese.
But there was certain mannerisms and things to help you to distinguish if they were Thai or Chinese. But the history of Taiwan was another thing that fascinated me. Is when Chiang Kai-shek came into the country from China. Literally took the country over, renamed the country, and kind of pushed they were called
Formosans.
Formosan. They pushed them aside. They became second-hand citizens in their own country. And somehow they adapted. I guess like when they brought slavery to the United States, we adapted, not we, because I wasn't there, but the poor people, they had no choice but to adapt to the situation. When Chiang Kai-shek died, we were there, and I have clippings of that. They expected all the Americans that lived there, that were living there, visiting, to respect their custom of mourning 1 year. Mm-hmm. And they hired professional mourners for, when someone died. If you don't have friends, nobody come to your funeral, they used to hire people to come and mourn. Wow. And when Chiang Kai-shek died, it was, and the U.S. sent their vice president, I think, to the funeral. Oh, that was an uproar. They felt they felt that was an insult. The president should have come. And but what we did honor their custom by orders from the military high uppers. We didn't. We had to tone down parties and no loud music and things of that nature. Kind of becomes a little bit more subdued in the community. But I enjoyed Taiwan. I didn't want to leave. I cried when I got there and I cried when I left.
How long were you there for? Or both of
A
you there
year.
for?
We were there a year.
Do you know what year this was that you were living in Taiwan?
1776. We were there in 75. We were there for the bicentennial. Mm-hmm. And when Vietnam fell, we were there.
That's not a date, though. Yeah.
I'm sorry?
That's a date, yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm about the dates. I'm 77 almost, and my memory is not quite as good. I can't remember the dates, but I know we were there for the bicentennial, and we were there when Vietnam fell. As a matter of fact, we lived in a place called International Village. We were on this street, and the president of Vietnam's family was on the next street over from us. And of course, the news report that they were in New York. The family was in New York, but actually they were in Taiwan. And the reason we know that is they had armed guards with machine guns and things patrolling that particular street, that little area. And the kids were enrolled in Taipei American School, and our kids went to Taipei American School at the same time. But our kids rode the bus, and they went in limos. So that was an interesting point.
Can I follow up on that for a minute? So when you say, you mean the fall of Saigon, when the helicopters got pushed over into the water and all that, you were there in Taiwan at that time, seeing it on television?
At the end of the Vietnam War.
When they signed the final papers, or when people were just trying to leave, and there was all that chaos when people were trying to flee Vietnam on the last helicopter?
I'm not sure about that. I don't know.
I'm not really sure because we weren't getting very much news.
No, that's going off.
But I know Vietnam, the news that reported that Vietnam, the end of the war, has come.
See, in Vietnam, they had so many coup d'etats and stuff like that, so I'm not sure.
So you had mentioned going back to your children and
Right,
them going
yes.
to school in Taiwan. One of your children, Mark, was born in Germany, whereas Stephen was born in Pensacola, if that's correct. What was it like being able to raise your children in these different areas? And, what was that experience like, being able to deal with those cultural differences, raising 3 children?
That is a great question. I think it was the best thing that could have happened to my children. My children
For you, said not for them.
you can go.
No, I said for you. She asked you for you.
Oh,
They're for both of you. For both of you.
I think they were very well diverse. They did not fit into any one category. When we left Europe, they were used to seeing Germans, French, all kinds of cultures.
Wow.
And when they came here, they were dropped into a society that they weren't comfortable with, they weren't familiar with, because...
I think you're mixing this.
But
When they came to high school,
it was a great experience raising them in a
When they
different
came from
culture.
Taiwan,
It
they were
exposed
3.
them to so much. What now?
when they came from Taiwan, they were 4 and 5,
No, let's Pam was in elementary. We don't have to go there. They were older than that. But
you were
in
saying-
Germany, they learned to speak German. Pam, my oldest daughter, she had a lot of German friends. She would spend the night with them and go to their parties. And the boys were a little bit younger than my daughter, but they knew a little German. And as a matter of fact, my daughter went online and said, if you know what a knockwurst or schnitzel or such, contact me. And she found a group of people that were stationed in Germany at about the same time she was, and started meeting every year. They met in, what's the name of that little town? There's a German town not too far from here, Hollebach. And they would meet these kids that grew up in the German area and spend a weekend there. And we went one year, and it was just like going back to Germany again. It's a German town. They have a big restaurant called Hollebach Restaurant, and they had served German food. They had the Oompa bands and the beer tents and all of that set up.
Did you hear the yodeling? Did they yodel?
Yes, they did everything. It was just like going back to Germany.
and they had the boot too.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
and we did the boot.
That's what
And-
the
And if you don't hold it the right way, you get. But we
you have to
did
twist it. You have to twist
Yes.
it.
You have to have the boot. You have to have the toe
Uh-huh.
up, because otherwise, when it breaks, it'll slosh down on you.
The bubble would break.
Yes.
My granddaughter saw us doing the boot, and she says, Grandma, you drink after all those people? Yeah, you just pass it around. You know, just pray you don't get it.
She wasn't upset about the drinking around. She was upset about the drinking beer. She doesn't think that's a good idea. She's our regulator.
So at around what time did you guys come back to the United States, if you remember?
Ourselves, yeah.
It's been, he's been retired 30 years.
I think in 85, I retired in 85.
So we came back in, Pam graduated in 84, I think like 82.
So what was it like, coming back to the United States? Was there sort of a shift? You've talked a lot about the cultural differences and whatnot. What was it like returning and sort of assimilating back to the United States?
For me, it was a wonderful experience because we were stationed in California, and it's Fort Ord, which is located in Monterey County, and Monterey was God's country. It was a good experience. It's a good experience. And there were a lot of Italians there, so I felt like I may have been in another town. But for him, he ended up going to Korea, and we were left there, so
So you were staying in California while, Charles, you were in Korea.
Yeah. It's that that career, that point is almost the end of my career. We actually started out, we haven't been married yet. When we stopped my conversation, we were not married yet. We got married, I was 21, she was at 19, like she said. We went to the same high school, but she was 2 grades behind me. I graduated, like I said, went off and joined the military, but I didn't finish that. When I went to basic training, 6 months later, I was in Vietnam. I showed my stepfather. I really showed him. But anyway, so when I came back, the first time I met her she was in the 9th grade and I was in the 11th grade, I think it was. My brother, she was in the same class as he. So that's our first experience. She first came to Pensacola. Then
I was in his brother's homeroom from 7th through 12th grade.
Yeah, that was it.
So I knew his brother better than but I was in, when he came back from Vietnam, I was in the 12th grade. No, when he went to Vietnam, I was in 12th grade. Went there for a year, came back, I had started junior college. And I didn't know what Vietnam was or heard of it.
Can I shift back to you, please, Ms. Jefferson? Tell us about what it was like when you went to Vietnam, because that was a whole different time in the country.
It was at the time that I went to Vietnam, there was not a war going on. It was not officially a war. We were advisors. The only people being killed were officers. I was enlisted. And I was a cryptographic recorder, so which means that I had a high security clearance. When I got to Vietnam, I met this guy he was an embalmer. He was a draftee. And I was scheduled to go up north, which would have meant I would have been in more of a dangerous position. But he said, "You want to stay here?" And I said, "Yeah, I'd like to stay here." So here meaning Saigon. Speaking of Saigon, they call it the Paris of the Far East. It's a beautiful city. It is a beautiful city. And the sights and sounds you see, it's just a nice place to visit. It's almost like Paris is what it is.
Have you gone back to Saigon since the war?
Nope.
Would you like to?
I would have liked to go back just to see, because they made just like the Germans, they made the adjustment of the two countries coming back together. It was seamless almost. It was not like Afghanistan where they're fighting each other and all that. The families rejoined themselves, but was a nice. The end of the war was a good thing, even though the way we left, there's no other way to leave. You know, we talk so much now about the way we left Afghanistan. I'm a Democrat, so that kind of shows you. There was no other way you could leave, and to blame the president for the fact that some person managed to smuggle a bomb in, I think it's unfair. But that's opinions. Everybody's got one, just like noses. Let's see what
You were talking about your job as a
Yes,
cryptographic.
cryptographic.
What year was that?
This 60.
63,
Four.
64.
So this is before the Idrang Valley in '65
Yes.
and all that. So
Yes.
so you really were just an advisor.
Yes, I was an advisor.
Okay, so what was that like? Were the people open to you as
Well,
American?
Oh yes. In Vietnam, they were not as friendly as the Taiwanese, but they were very accepting. We disrupted their society though. The Americans are.
Every country.
You talk about the ugly Americans. It's not so much that we do bad things, but we affect their. When we interact with them, we have certain things that, for example, in Taiwan, in Thailand, they live most of their outside of Bangkok. They have villages and farmers do the oxen to do the fields and all that, and they take the rice and shake it put it on the streets in the city, and they shake it to get the rice off of it, and sweep it up and ship it out. Lost my thought again.
What was like the Americans being there? How they changed the culture?
Yeah, they wanted to. The Americans we bring radios. We'd get toasters. They would sleep on a mat. We got blankets. We got mattresses, and built them up. And inside of the hutch, they had, instead of the mat that they used to live on, and a roll-up mat, and then you get the portable radios, and we just totally affected their society.
When it escalated to the war, did you get a new job, or did you actually serve in Vietnam, or did you get moved somewhere else?
My job like I said, I was crypto operator. My job was when they repaired the equipment, I had to test it to make sure that it was operating properly. Mm-hmm. My way I got the job is that, like I said, I met this
embalmer.
Mm-hmm. He talked to his warrant officer, and a warrant officer in the Army is gold. He pulled me off of going up north where it would have been more dangerous, and I stayed in Saigon. I lived in a hotel. I got money to buy my food and to pay for the hotel. And so when the first time they had a coup d'etat in Vietnam, we rode from our repair shop to the hotel. We passed by a Vietnamese position where they had grenades and guns and everything, and they were shooting into this building. Mm-hmm. I have pictures.
Mm-hmm. Were you there when they killed the Vietnamese president right before Kennedy died?
Yes.
Okay, you were actually
I was there when Kennedy. Yes, I was there when Kennedy died.
So what happened when the Vietnamese president was killed first? Because you would have probably been there for that. They both died in '63.
Yeah, it didn't affect us. Okay. We just, they were killing each other.
With the people that lived there, the Vietnamese, how they reacted.
I'm 20 years old. I'm right up down the streets. I don't know how the people felt.
Did you see any of the stuff later on when and I want to come back to Kennedy, but when the priest had decided they were trying to end the war and there was all that immolation stuff? Did you see any of that?
I didn't see it personally, but I knew that was happening. Yes, yeah, that I was aware of. Yes.
Yeah, as a way of protesting the Vietnam War.
Yes.
religious figures were actually
That's
setting
right.
themselves on
They-
fire
they would
to protest
actually
the
do
war.
that.
Right in the
They
street,
would.
they just set themselves on fire.
I mean, that takes a bunch of relief to me. But I was very superficial at the time, so it was just something that happened.
Well, just one more question for me, and then I'll turn it back to the group. You said you were there when President Kennedy was
Yes.
killed. What was that like to be overseas and hear that the president had been killed?
It was because I had a lot of respect. I was not as political then as now, but there was a big stir with Kennedy. I mean, Kennedy brought a lot of people into into politics, and so I felt like it affected me a lot because I came home not long after. When did he get
That was
shot?
November 1963.
Yes, I came back in
Before Thanksgiving.
January, I think it was, but just after Christmas.
Well, when Kennedy was shot, I was in the 12th grade. Was the 63?
Yes, ma'am, 63.
Yeah, I was in the 11th grade. I was in my comparative government class.
Oh, right.
And I remember
That's
it
right.
very well. The teacher was at that time, I think, the president of the NAACP. And he was called out of the classroom, and then he came back into the classroom. He was very sad, I remember. And he says, I want everyone to be quiet. Our president has just been killed. He didn't say killed, he said shot. And then later on, he told the class that the president had died. And my feeling was, I classify myself as a little weird sometimes. I felt like the end of the world was coming. I felt very scared. I felt like, the black people, we were really going to be lynched, and the Ku Klux Klan was going to really run rampant, and, that was my thinking. It wasn't a very mature way of thinking, but at the time it was mature for me. But I was very scared, and that our lifestyle was going to change so drastically because it seemed Kennedy had helped so many people, not just black people, but he had such a kind heart.
He got things started.
Yeah.
Actually, Johnson got stuff done.
So it's understandable that, John F. Kennedy's assassination was clearly like a marker in terms of your sort of political awakening.
Yes.
What are some other moments that you feel have really driven you and catalyzed that sort of politicalness that you said wasn't really present when you were younger?
Right. I think it's when Dr. King was killed, that was to me a traumatic thing. I mean, I felt like personal because of the way he was killed, and actually, what led up to that, before he got killed, all the turmoil in the country, and then actually there were people who were predicting that he would not. They thought that he would be trying to run for president, and that no one wanted him to do that, and that's so when he was killed, I think that was actually my first awakening to pay attention to politics, to pay attention to what's going on in Washington, D.C., as opposed to where I'm actually physically located.
Did that lead you to join any organizations or start getting involved
Not
in
then,
some?
because in the military, you don't have much time for joining. But when I retired, since I retired in '85, I became a member of the NAACP. As a member of the NAACP, I was on the, not on the board, what do they call it? The
Executive board.
Yeah, on the executive board. What are the people? Anyway, I was a member of the executive board.
Representative.
What was I going to say? We, as a member of the NAACP, we started going to a different organization. At the time, not long after we joined, she formed a youth council, every NAACP, they want you to have an NAACP council student. She started one here in Pensacola. The first time, I think, was the first time. It's not the first time; it was the second time.
64.
And it was started, and she took them to, I think, over an 8 or 10 year period, back and forth to the NAACP conventions. That entails bringing them into the organization and educating them what is the NAACP and what's the purpose. And it makes these young people more aware of what's actually going on as a black person in the country. And also, it's not just a black organization, by the way. I'm sure you know that. It also may enhance the interactivity between black and white, because all white are not bad. Blue-eyed devils, they're not. And that's another thing that really, when I first, that was what I wanted to say was another thing that caused me to be more active was the Elijah Muhammad and the Muhammad Ali during that period when all that went on. That's another reason that I became more and more aware of what's going on in the community, within the community, because you have to have an active, you have to be doing something. But I found that I got disenfranchised with the NAACP because I feel like as an organization and with its goals, it can no longer do the things that it used to do. And like actually, the people who are actively working against black people, they are not affected. It used to be they did not want to be called a racist. I don't care. You call me a racist all you want. I don't care. They don't, and it's not all people. Matter of fact, like I said, I had my very good experience with my mother because that really impressed me. She worked for the people she worked for as a housemaid, as a maid, was a servant. He was a commander, and he actually looked out for my mother because we didn't know the difference. And that's one reason I didn't realize the value of winning a scholarship and not accepting it.
So going back to the youth council in the NAACP and the creation of this council, how do you feel that the Pensacola community was receptive, or what was the sort of environment towards civil rights at the time?
It was very receptive. They were, I'll let you talk, yeah. I'll let you do that.
Because that's my passion. I really wanted to say something about when Martin Luther King was shot. I think we were in Germany, weren't we? We were in Germany and we heard on the AFN radio that he had been shot and killed. And soon after that, Robert Kennedy was shot.
Let me frame it for you. What happened was in March, Johnson said, "I shall not seek and I will not accept nomination for president." Then Kennedy was killed at Audubon Ballroom in June. And then King was assassinated, in April before then. So, and then the whole world was watching the Democratic Convention that happened. So, 1968 must have been just the craziest year.
Yes.
Could you frame and talk about? Because before that, Malcolm X was killed in March, just 2 years before that. So everybody, all the leaders were being assassinated. What was that like for you at that time?
That's what I was attempting to say earlier. It didn't get out. Thank you.
Go ahead.
No, he said it, yeah.
You go ahead and say how you felt, because I have trouble expressing myself.
Even us today, there's so much to think about. One president, he was losing the war, so he couldn't run, and then King was killed a few days later, and then Kennedy was killed like a month and a half later, and then the whole Democratic Convention, happened. The whole world was watching. What was 1960? Because everybody talks about 1960.
Overseas.
Yeah, so it was a watershed year for all Americans. What was it like for you overseas, seeing all this happen?
I'm trying to think. We were affected. But I think when we came back to the States, I think that's when we came back into New Jersey, isn't it? When was the Black Panthers and all that? going on. Was that
That was the whole 60s. But
Yes.
they
when they were burning the cities and all that?
yeah, so after King was assassinated is when
Yes,
the burnings took
yes.
place.
Yeah.
We came back from Germany right about that time, and it was scary to me. That's the only time, personally, I think all the places I've been, and all the different people and things, that the United States is the best thing going.
Yeah.
It is the best thing going. We have our problems, which we are trying to solve, but the United States of America is, and we have to, and that's why to move to today, that's why it's scary to me what was going on in our country right now. I don't think that everybody is looking out for the good of the country. People have different goals and things they want to accomplish outside. If it's against the law, we can just change the law.
This morning, I just saw on the news, just this morning, they were talking to Senator Tommy Tuberville of Alabama. And he used to be the coach at Auburn. So they were talking about white nationalism. And the interviewer said to him, well, people are talking about white nationalism. He said, well, I don't think that that white nationalists necessarily, whatever he said about it. And the reporter said, well, if you're a white nationalist, you're a racist, aren't you? And he said, well, that's some people's opinion. That was just said on the television a few moments ago. So you had talked about shame earlier. It seems that the things that people were once not willing to say openly, people are now willing to say openly. Is that part of what you're talking about?
It's scary in the sense that it used to be.
I think even the racists would realize, people who were definitely against black people, they still had a sense of person.
Moral.
They didn't respect you as an individual, but they gave you the right to be. Now they don't. They would feel bad. That was the thing that when I started thinking about the slavery and the discrimination and such, I could wonder, how can people go to church on Sunday and pray and leave and come out and do some of the things they did to black people? I just could not get that. But the saving grace to me is that I still feel this country, I think we are headed toward a crisis, because if Donald Trump is made president, there's no telling what our core, all our values to me are in jeopardy. I think the things that we hold dear are not dear anymore.
That's what I was gonna say. It used to be racism that scared you, and but now it's more than that. It's morality. It's having respect for other people, their values, and it's huge.
The loss of shame.
Yes.
The loss of there's no more shame.
There's no value.
Yeah, no shame.
To human life. There's no value to principles, everyday principles we live by. Sexuality is horrible.
You might remember. What is that quote that said, everything I need to know I learned in kindergarten?
That's a poster.
Yeah, what is that?
My mother has that as a former kindergarten teacher. So everything I need to know I learned in kindergarten.
That's what it is.
Please and thank you, may I, excuse me, and a whole list of things like that.
Right.
Yeah. It is interesting that the leading candidate for president now is a twice impeached and now 37 charge indicted individual who is leading in the polls.
Right.
So what does that say about our country? If you don't mind, you give an observation on that.
Money. Money is the root of everything. It's the root of evil, and this is
The love of
money, and there seems to be a trend toward loving of money and power. Those are the two things. If you have those, then you're up here. If you don't have money and you don't have the power, then you're kind of in a lower class. And it's scary because that means that they've taken out the religious teachings are not being followed.
You're talking about the elimination of the middle class.
Yes.
So instead of haves, a middle class and have-nots, it's just
Exactly.
haves and have-nots.
Right.
Yes. And in Taiwan, that was the situation to me is the have and have not. There were a group of people that were very wealthy. There were a group of people that were the workers, the worker bees that kept the country going. Kept the businesses going and growing. And the more money the business and the companies made, the less the working class had, it seemed.
But in America, there's always been a middle class.
Yes.
Yes, yes, and that's slowly being
And
eliminated.
the other one is the moderate for the voters, the moderate voters. That's getting squeezed. It's getting squeezed. We don't have the people in the middle who usually determine the elections. That's getting smaller and smaller.
Yeah, I do have a question. You mentioned the religious teachings. What religious tradition were you brought up in, and how has that impacted your life up to this point?
Well, I'm Baptist, and I was brought up as a Baptist. My dad was a deacon, and just the core values, the 10 Commandments. If you obey the 10 Commandments, you're living your life it will fall as it should. But if you're violating the thou shalt not steal, kill, lie, then that's where morality just kind of disappears. You have no morals, and because you don't believe in and live by the 10 Commandments.
I think personally, where I got mine is before I turned 6 or 7 years old, because we went to church, and sometimes when I'd go to church, I would actually understand what the pastor was saying. It made sense to me. I would be affected by it. I knew it wasn't just me sitting in there and waiting till Mom would go home and eat some chicken or whatever. I really enjoyed the services. I really enjoyed, to me, the old church where they had the devotional service. I liked the idea of the deacons who would lead, and they say, I want the laws of downtown. I could just feel it. And that's where I got my religious, right? When I was a very young person, and I've kept it with me all this time.
So was it Baptist as well?
Baptist, yes.
But, we dabble in Baha'i.
No, I didn't dabble in nothing. I didn't dabble at all.
The Jehovah's Witness. I feel like this is my philosophy. I may not retain a lot,
You
but
can study
I
it, but
think
we're talking about belief and studying. Now, there's a difference.
you have to study or look into all different kinds of things, religion, and then you choose the one that you think is the true religion for you. What you believe in. But I'm still a Baptist. All these other things. When Jesus and God are not the head of all religion, then it's that wipes it out for me.
Well, you
Got a question
can't.
for you down there. Do you want to get your question in?
Oh, you can continue the story. I love learning. But before this interview, you said that Councilwoman Brown was one of your students. Could you elaborate on that really quick? Was she part of
Yes.
your youth council?
Yes, she is now a city council person. In high school, her name her name was Tony.
She may not.
She has accepted the name of Tenny Ade, but she was very active. Tony, you remind me a lot of Tony in high school. Yes, because she was. You all know her. You do. Just like she is now, in high school she was that way. Very much focused. She did not. I don't think she had any kind of a relationship with boys all through high school. I don't think she did. When she got to college, she did. That's
That's
I'm
an
not.
interesting definition of focus. So
Yes,
we're all,
yes. But that's what I mean. She was not dating, and she was about her classes. In the club, we had the mission of the club was to enhance the visibility of black people in the Pensacola community. And what we did was on Black History Month, we put on, and Tony would write a lot of them. We put on we got local people and emphasized what they had done in this community. We did everybody, as I was an English teacher, everybody who has a Negro History Week, you know who
Carter G. Woodson.
you know Carter G. Woodson, you know the lady on the bus,
Rosa
you know
Parks.
Dr. King. But after a while, I had my students. What I taught was at-risk kids who were very well grounded. They didn't see much use for school. And nobody's gonna ask me about no noun when I get out. So
You mean the pronouns?
yes. So they were tired of hearing about Rosa Parks. So that's when we decided, okay, we went around and got different people. There was a local guy who was very active in our community, and he did a lot of things. But Tony was into that kind of thing. She was into whatever project we decided to come up with. She, in a lot of instances, she dreamed them up. When she was president, we instituted what do they call the celebration that we do, Kwanzaa. When Kwanzaa came out, we decided to do a Umoja. We did a program every year, and that was her idea. So what I'm in answer to your question.
In high school, she, as far as getting information, making the students aware of who they are and where they come from. Tony was that person. I didn't have as much contact with her, but the little contact that I did have with her, that's the impression that I got.
The name of
She was the go-to person.
The name of the club was Positive. The name of the club was Positivity. We only accepted 10 members each year. And in order to get in, you had to explain to the rest of the club why you wanted to get in. Why do you want to be?
Organic leadership.
Yes.
Recognizing the people in your local area.
That's right.
As opposed to just Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks.
Right.
So,
Yes,
who are your
sir.
local leaders? What are they doing around the corner?
Right. And we had a lot of, so that made it more interesting. But Tony was very active.
Go ahead.
Very active. I think she
There's
asked
a
a
point
question.
that I was going to try and make with the youth group, the NAACP Youth Council. There had not been a youth council here since the 60s, 64, I think. And when we moved here, my daughter had participated in a program, in NAACP AXO program. And I wanted to implement that because I thought there were so many talented kids around. We need to tap into that because John Singleton, the filmmaker, he was an AXO participant. And there were several others. I can't think of the names off the top of my head. But we had that same caliber of talent here: art, science, chemistry, painting, literature. There, I think like 35 categories in the AXO program. Do you know anything about that? No. It's but it's academic, cultural, technological, scientific Olympics. That's what the acronym.
AXO.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
do know that program.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so, anyway, since there was not an NAACP youth group, I presented it to the NAACP council and say, we need a youth group. So I'm a worker bee. I'm not academically I'm not really challenged, but if I had a project, I work on that project and I make it come to be. But so I told my husband we need to organize a youth group, and I asked him would he help me with it, and of course he agreed. And first group of people I wanted to approach was that positivity group to join the NAACP. Then I did flyers, went to all the churches, contacted the youth people in all of the churches and saying, we're forming a youth council, we need participants, and we're losing the legacy of the NAACP. And the only way you can maintain that legacy is bring the youth along with the adults. So when we first organized the group, there were over 100 kids that signed up. And if you look in the, go through the archives at the Pensacola News Journal, there's an article about, the youth group. So my purpose in joining it was to give them to help them to know about the history of the NAACP. What was the purpose? Why was there a need for the NAACP? And why was there a need for the youth to be a part of it? And so the kids got all excited. We had our little and then I took them, I wanted to take, we had our first convention. Can't even think where that was. But anyway, I wanted to take every kid in that youth council to the convention
I think we're over time.
Well, please finish. I think you should ask your question, and it was Pensacola based.
You can ask them.
It was, you answered it with the youth council. That was my next question
Oh, the
was
youth
about
council?
the youth council.
Good. I thought we should have gone back to that.
Please go ahead.
Oh no.
So
she's
the
answered.
reason I wanted to take the group to the convention, and there were rules. When the youth go to the convention, we have the same curriculum as the adults. The only difference is the meetings and the training were geared toward the young people. They had their own young people workshops.
You might have NAACP members here.
I need to pay my dues, but I'm an NAACP member.
Are you?
Yeah.
So you know how it works.
The youth branch, and then one is a branch and one is an organization. I forget
Right.
which one is which, but you always have like a
Yeah,
youth
the branch.
to go
Yes.
along with it.
And when they went to the youth workshops, they had to dress like they were going to a business meeting. They had to conduct themselves like adults. They weren't, the girls couldn't wear hot pants and stuff like that. They had to dress appropriately. We had to meet on time. I mean, we had to be at a meeting at 8 o'clock in the morning. But at the end of the day, after all the workshops and the meetings and things of that nature, they all provided a party so the kids could enjoy each other. They can enjoy meeting and mingling. Mm-hmm. We also had an AXO program. He took over the AXO. We took kids that participated we had some beautiful artists that drew painting, oil and water, etc. We had people that wrote poetry, and one girl wrote a screenplay. And what else did we have? I'm trying to think. But there were scientific projects that we didn't take any scientists from this area, but there were scientists, there were people that did outstanding work in chemistry. I need to look it up, how many, but I think that's something that would interest you, exactly how that program is and how it worked. They gave scholarships for the winners. And they aired the competition on television, national television.
Okay. So just to close up and, take a break, since, you guys have shared so much about your extensive history, which we've all enjoyed being able to hear the different aspects of your life. I just wanted to touch on one more thing regarding sort of the NAACP and also just where we stand now. So you mentioned the importance of involving children and youth in the preservation of the NAACP's legacy and essentially sort of not just preserving like the multidisciplinary culture and science and all these things, but also giving youth a role in the civil rights movement essentially. So where do you feel you stand now with preserving the NAACP and civil rights, and what do you feel is the role of youth now, especially as we face such a rollback of civil rights? Where do you think our role, as youth researchers and other children of Pensacola, where was their role in being able to preserve everything that we've fought for so far?
In my opinion, the NAACP is undergoing a change. They're realizing that we need to but we need a different approach. Demonstrations, the NAACP used to be able to come to a city, have a huge demonstration with an agenda, and present that, and then perhaps have someone react to it or not react, whatever, but it will still be brought forward. That doesn't work anymore. People are not as affected by a huge demonstration. Like when Trump was initially elected, that Women's March on Washington, it had no effect on anything. It was there, it happened, but it did not cause anything to happen. And I think the NAACP is I think they're rethinking it now. What is their approach now? It used to be lawyers were just there to guide you so you wouldn't go off illegal. But now they're going to have to go into the lawmaking. They need to assume a different role, which I think they are trying to do now. But that's not an easy thing to do because there's so much going on. But as far as young people, what's happening here, I am a member of the Martin Luther King Commemorative Celebration Commission here in Pensacola. Mm-hmm. Every year we put on we do certain events to highlight Dr. King's life, his death, and his dream of what's going to happen in the future. And so I think that's the kind of direction we're going to have to go to, is educate our young people. And when I say young people, you guys are included in my young people because I'm 80. We have to educate you all on what is your role going down as you're going forward. And, whether you're black, white, Asian, whatever, whether you're religious, non-religious, whether you believe in abortion, not abortion, how will you affect the United States of America in the future? And by future, I mean the next 15 to 20 years. That's what's got to happen.
Okay, I was thinking that know your history, look at the present, and think about the future. That's how the young people can benefit from the NAACP, mm-hmm. if that makes sense. And there's a saying that says, when much is given, much is expected. I can't.
To those whom much is given,
yes.
Much is required.
Yes.
Yes.
So think about that. We have voting rights. We have this and we have that, and most of that was done through the efforts of the NAACP. Mm-hmm. So you all have that freedom and those privileges. So think about it: the past, the present, and the future.
But that's what I was talking about. Is that these voting rights? Right now, they're trying to take a lot of those things away. Yeah. Souls to the poll.
And that's where the NAACP
boxes. I look at the one thing I do want to put in, our news organizations are not serving us well. None of them. None. Even the ones that I agree, they are not serving us well. They give us half stories.
And
They
their
give us
opinions.
partial stories.
We don't want
And
their
there's so
opinions.
much opinion in the news. You don't know where to, you have to listen to, if you can have the time, the patience to do it, listen to more than one to get a full story. You cannot depend on, right now I can tolerate MSNBC. But the others, CNN and that news walk, Chris Cuomo is driving me crazy.
He's mad. So he used to be very proficient, but now
Who you talking about?
Chris Cuomo, because he got fired, and so
Oh, yeah.
he just decided, well, I'm not giving real news anymore, I'm gonna just give junk news.
Well, that's been very powerful advice for the future, us preserving our past. That's what we're trying to do today,
Right.
and we hope we've done right by you in being able to share your story, share your experiences and the lessons you've learned today. Thank you so much for coming and joining us and sharing your stories today. If you have any final comments, feel free to share, but otherwise we can wrap up.
Play the middle or the top.
That was nice.